Hello everyone, my name's Jake Kennard. I am being presented here as co-founder of KETS, which is a quantum security company, and I was asked to sort of talk about the journey that we've gone on since incorporating. And I did point out that we actually only incorporated this week, so it might be quite a short journey. However, what I would say is that we have been working on this kind of commercialization for the past maybe year or so, and longer in some respects. I've kind of tried to go for a 50-50 split of some of the science, sort of what we're actually doing, and some of the kind of lessons that I've learnt, which may be good lessons or not. I leave that for you to decide. I'm sure that there's plenty more experienced people than me who can tell me that. So what's the background? So probably about a year and a half ago, we were able to demonstrate in the lab upstairs here, basically a chip-to-chip QKD. So for those not familiar with QKD, essentially it's a way of sharing a secret key that can be between two parties that can be used in security applications for encryption or things like this. So I won't say too much about that. I'm happy to talk about that offline. But in essence, what we had here was a system that was very different from what had come before, in the sense that it was actually based in this integrated photonics that we specialize here in Bristol. So we had a sender here which had basically everything that it needed on it to do QKD. So there's a sort of a laser here, and we're able to encode on these things. And this is what it looks like. So it's quite small, you'll see. So it's sort of 6 millimeters long. These 3 prongs are the kind of the contacts for the laser. And we can basically use this to do QKD. And we need an optical fiber, so this is sort of sending photons out, and then we send to a receiver which looks like this. Which also, okay, it's a little bit bigger, but actually is still relatively small. So this kind of got the cogs turning, I guess, in our heads, right? We sort of realized that there was a bit of an advantage, because what did the other systems look like on the market? Well, they sort of looked a bit like this. So these systems are, there's a bunch here. So there's ID Quantique systems, Toshiba systems. They're quite large, bulky boxes. So we kind of thought, well, maybe there's some case here to say that our systems are going to have some advantage over these guys. And so we kind of made a list, as you do. So what's the obvious thing that we first did? We have this kind of reduced footprint. So that's the chip. That's Chris's pinky finger. He was chosen because he's got the biggest pinky finger. So I make a jest, of course, but obviously, if I want to get one of those in my phone, it's got to look like that, and it can't look like that. So naturally, these things are quite low power solutions. So essentially, due to the kind of integrated nature, they actually use significantly less power than the kind of fiber optic systems that you can find elsewhere on the market, which is obviously kind of important. That you kind of imagine some of the scenarios where you might use this, say in data centers, where if you've got loads and loads and loads of them, power usage in data centers is a massive concern, and actually one of the main areas which they're actually concerned about. This CMOS compatible is what that really means ultimately is that these things are fabricated in standard telecommunications foundries. So actually we don't fabricate them in-house, we just do all the design, all the testing, and we send them out to be fabricated. So same as we do with the CQP, and that gives us a really good advantage, because these systems, all the individual components have been tested and verified in the real world over and over and over again, in telecoms, in computing, and these type of systems. The other advantage of these is you can kind of think that actually it's not too hard to think about doubling these. So I can stamp a few out. I can think about putting electronics on the same device, these type of things, which is all this CMOS compatible. So this is a kind of a technical problem, technical point. These systems are very flexible, so we can actually reconfigure them on the fly, so we can actually use them in very different ways, depending on particular network scenarios or usage scenarios that we're actually interested in, just by changing essentially the kind of the voltages and the software that we use on top of that, which is kind of a big difference to these guys who work in a very set way, which may be useful in some scenarios, may be not useful in others. So there's a lot of flexibility in these. And we can do all of that whilst maintaining the state-of-the-art performance of these guys. And ultimately, we believe that we can go further because we have the inherent stability, as I say, and ultimately that will allow us to go faster and put more on one device. So ultimately, we can get better performance. So we kind of wrote this up, and actually we were fortunate enough to to win the university's sort of new enterprise competition, where we won us kind of a small pot of money by sort of writing this into a business plan and ultimately by kind of taking a shot at what some of the markets were. I would say at this stage we were still pretty green. I would argue we're still pretty green.
What comes before green?
Yeah, I don't know what comes before green. Lighter green, I don't know. But actually it was good enough to win, and I think that even with our kind of our very minimal experience, it helped us show that we were kind of onto something. So this is where I get into my my lessons part of the talk. That the biggest problem that we had to overcome was that we thought we were like this. You know, we were the business guys who had all the ideas, you know, and we were going to change the world, right? Whereas the issue is that actually everyone else saw this. And it's kind of true, because you forget that actually everyone outside your little bubble doesn't speak in the same way as you. So really this journey is about going from that to that. And how can we do that? And I don't know if we're there yet. I'd like to think so. Or we're somewhere along the way. I certainly don't have as much hair as that. So maybe it's more along those lines. So the biggest thing that we were able to do, and we were very lucky, was to get someone in who really knew about business. So to have that business mentor. So key thing is to get a business mentor. Maybe not that guy. Fortunately, we had Claudio, who sat there, who was significantly better in many ways. Actually, he's been really, really influential on us, because obviously he's able to guide us in how to make that transition and how to sort of interact with the world. And I think the other thing is that having someone from outside is very useful, because they can tell you the hard things. You know, that, for example, you know, you might not be the best person to lead this company. You need to get some outside help, for example, these type of things. And so that was a really, really helpful and really useful part of our training. And I guess that you came in maybe a year ago or so, something like that. And we're still talking, and you're still haranguing us, you know, getting us along that path. So one of the biggest changes that we had to make was stop talking about our product. We originally came in and said, look, we've got this amazing thing, it does all this amazing stuff. What we actually needed to do was start talking about solution. What's the problem we're going to solve? So instead of talking technical, let's talk about the problems, the real-world problems that people and businesses want to solve. And so how did we get to that? Well, we talked to everyone. Like, I cannot stress how much this was really, really useful. Just talk to everyone. So we basically took the plunge and went and talked to some bankers. We sort of thought bankers were a good area to get QKD in. Turns out they kind of weren't. But we wouldn't have known that without going. They don't really know about this stuff, and they sort of don't care, but they do talk to other people who care about this stuff, and they actually get all of this information from their security providers, and so we're actually put in touch with these kind of guys through this, and we kind of got to a better area. But then we also started talking to, I guess, government as well. Obviously, networking is kind of is an obvious area, and so that was a very obvious area which we did get right first time. Defence, ongoing, Boeing and Raytheon, and of course Airbus, who this is a bit of an old slide now. We've been talking to those guys, very interested in the area. Critical infrastructure was one of these areas that we've kind of explored to some extent with middling results. We also talked to a lot of other startups. So this is something I didn't kind of really realize at the start, that actually this was a really, really useful and interesting area, that there's this kind of building up of quantum startups, and actually everyone's got slightly different expertise but kind of working towards the same goal. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And of course we've talked to investors and had some interest there. So that was really useful, because we started here and then we kind of knocked all the way through. And so I think this kind of networking idea is kind of vital, because you can't jump to here, you have to sort of go through people, right? You have to go through this network, and it's hard to get there in one go. And then really I was going to sort of finalize by saying flexibility is the kind of the biggest thing that we have. And not only in terms of our business model and what we kind of do, but actually our scenario that we were in, and I think hopefully that the QTech system will provide, is that we had the flexibility and the space to go and do this whilst having, for example, a stable income not having to live necessarily month to month. We can do this in our spare time. And of course, this is what this QTech program will allow you to do, is to go out and do that talking to people, which naturally takes time. And I think that's the kind of the flexibility that you need to be able to kind of achieve that kind of work. That's really all I have to say. It was a kind of a whistle stop. I hope that's all right.
That's great. Thank you.
That's it. And there's some pictures of Bristol and chips and packages.
Any questions quickly?
What stage is the business at now?
Well, we incorporated on Tuesday, so about that stage. We do actually have our first sort of collaboration with Yuri's company in Crypto Labs. So we've managed to get our first consultancy contract in. So sort of moving forward, and of course targeting the Innovate UK calls that are coming out or are out with various people. So we're kind of moving forward. We're not quite at the stage of selling an actual product, but close, I think. So that's the area.
I'm curious, you talked about flexibility.
Mm.
Can you elaborate a little bit? How have you been flexible?
Yeah, so I think, so one good example is that we were kind of hitting this QKD idea, which has a lot of subcomponents. And I think, one of which was quantum random number generators. And we were kind of originally aimed at this goal of QKD, but actually we realized that if we could be a bit flexible, that there was a market for quantum random number generators. And that was actually an opportunity that perhaps might slow us down to the end, but actually it will enable us to do that work. So that was one particular key area in terms of, and that's the kind of the classic pivot to some regards. I think also, I think the flexibility kind of thing was in the two ways that we were lucky to be in a position that we were flexible, i.e. We didn't have to compress everything into one kind of short space of time. Ultimately, we could, in essence, go out, talk to one set of people, wait a long time, go and talk to another set of people, and think about it. And as we go, and in that way, there was no fixed amount of time. If you sort of see what I mean, that's sort of what I mean by flexible as well. I would say that's pretty much what I meant. Those sort of two things.
Maybe like CQP was incredibly flexible, but I guess do this
Right.
in some of our main time on the job, so others wouldn't have been. And it feeds back into the research, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you make the choice between licensing this to someone else and starting your own company? Like what?
So I think well, there's a lot of factors. Number one is, what do people want to give you money to do? If they, do you mean in terms of the university or in terms of your company?
To go down the path of starting your own business and
Yeah.
incorporating
Yeah.
Tuesday. Another path might be to go to IE Complete and say,
Right.
we've got way better technology than you. You've got all the business contacts.
Yeah.
How about we do a deal?
Yeah, and absolutely, and I think that's still a potential. Don't think we have decided. And as I say, what's the answer to that is going to be wildly situation dependent. And I say that in the sense that you really want to kind of push that technology out into the world, and so you do that in the way that works, that makes the most sense to both yourself, your partners, that you can actually get some money in doing this at the same time and actually push the business forward. So to some extent, if you're lucky that you have 1 trillion customers and you can only do 10 contracts, then that's a different choice to having, I've got to do this or I've got to do that kind of scenario. So I think it's choices. I don't know if choice is the right word. I think like I say, you've got to be flexible in how you approach your business and not be too. Yeah, and exactly, not be too fixated in what you want to achieve or how you want to achieve it, if you sort of see what I mean.